Hello and welcome to this delayed edition of PostingCast. We initially planned to get this episode out last week, but all of us suffered significant psychic damage due to the topic of tonight's episode. We have invited Cassie and Charlie back on. As we promised them, we'd bring them on for something that was cheerful and delightful and would make them happy. And we have failed to do that. So apologies in advance to everybody listening to this. But my name's John. My pronouns are he and him.
My name's Ross. My pronouns are he or they.
Hi, my name is Cassie, and my pronouns are she and her.
I'm Charlie, and I use they and he.
We are here to discuss that
A crime. A crime has been committed.
Whose crime, John?
That's a good question, and we're going to spend about an hour talking about who has committed a crime here.
The film would lead you to believe it is the crimes of Dumbledore, but is he really a criminal or just a product of his society?
It's the crimes of Grindelwald, actually.
I see.
Yeah, come on. Weren't you paying attention when we watched the 2.5-hour movie where nothing happened?
I absolutely was not. So
yes, we're talking about Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them Too, The Crimes of Grindelwald. It is the second in J.K. Rowling's stunningly unsuccessful and incredibly stupid movies that shouldn't fucking exist. But we decided to watch it anyway because we hate ourselves. More importantly, we hate you, the listener. So I thought before we get into the movie, and because it will fill some time so we don't have to talk about the fucking stupid movie, we talk a little bit about how we kind of interacted with like Harry Potter before J.K. Rowling lost her entire goddamn mind. So who would like to kick us off?
I will, because mine is the shortest. So I was given a copy of, I think, the first book in 2004 by a very excitable friend of mine who was like, this will be the best thing that you've ever read. And he was wrong.
Nerd.
And then I read, like, just because it was such a big thing at the time. Like, I read, I think, either the first two or the first three books, and I remember nothing of them. I was, in 2004, I was 21. So, oh God, I was 21. So it just didn't, like, it was not written for me. I was too old for it. That's fine. But I remember reading at the time and thinking, I don't see what all of the fuss is about. Like, this just feels like sort of endless, like 1960s, 1970s books about boarding school that seemed to be really prevalent when we were growing up, even though as like a working class kid in Scotland, like nobody I knew went to boarding school. So it just felt very regressive to me.
Funny that,
yeah.
Funny
so
that.
That's been it for me. I sort of missed it completely, and it sort of, as it has expanded and gone deeper into the collective psyche, I've found more and more stuff that gives me reason to side eye it, especially working with kids and young people. And now JK has just gone. Not that the mask was ever really on, but has gone completely mask off. It hasn't been that big a surprise to me.
My experience with the franchise was that I never read any of the books. I went and saw the movies and like had a couple on VHS, I think. And I was very like lukewarm on the franchise. I was like, it's fine, it's fun, but I didn't really get into it any more than that. And then once I was around high school, once every like 2 months or so, somebody would ask me what Hogwarts house I was in or what my Patronus was, and I eventually came to hate it, which has only grown in time because of the Crimes of J.K. Rowling.
Hey, Cassie.
Yeah.
What's your Patronus?
Capybara. I used to wind people up. If they asked me what my Hogwarts house was, I would say House Lannister.
Mine was a dolphin, if anyone wants to know. I was obsessed with Harry Potter, which kind of started when I was about 12, because I had read every single book of mine and my brother's in the house. And so I started on my parents' bookshelf, and they were like, hey, you can't read those, read these instead. So I read Harry Potter, was absolutely obsessed. I don't know, I guess it was like a bit of escapism but there's so much other better books for that. But anyways, the thing I really liked about it was the actual community behind it, because there was like a lot of fan fiction that was like really nice and sweet and very fun to read. And a lot of the times it was better written than the actual books, but I digress. And then there were the headcanons, which I was absolutely obsessed with reading, which, there was the ones where it was like, oh, the dormitories would know if you were trans and would let you into the right dorm. And it was all just like very sweet to me, but obviously that's not how JK sees it. So that's kind of ruined the whole thing for me.
Yeah, that was an interesting one. I think someone brought it up recently that the girls could go into the boys' dorms, but the boys were not allowed to go into the girls' dorms.
Yes.
And it's just like, it was there all along.
Yeah, it really was.
I might possibly have been the most engaged in the Potter series out of everybody on this podcast. I read the first book like the year after it came out. My mum did an English lit degree, specializing in children's lit in the early 90s. And so my house was filled with excellent and brilliant children's literature. Jan Mark, Margaret Mayhew. I got into Terry Pratchett and stuff like that back then. And there was like just a shitload of really high quality text. And I will be forever grateful to her for that. And she didn't put me onto Harry Potter because she didn't think it was very well written. And she was right. But I got a copy anyway. And I read it and I was like, okay, this is cool. Good guys, bad guys. Yeah, it works. And then I read all of them when they came out, and I went to see all but the last two movies, because by the time we got to the last two movies, I was like, this sucks, But I read it all. I didn't have a Hogwarts house or a Patronus, which is it's a furry for middle class people. But I did have, I enjoyed reading the series. I thought that some of the casting choices for the movies were really good. It appeared to be basically just a place where British actors could get work when they stopped being the villains in American movies sometime in the mid-90s. There are some great actors doing good work in those films, in spite of the material that they were given to start with, or that the screenwriters had to start with. And yeah, kind of when you start examining it, it's that thing about, school sports star gets everything he wants and grows up to become a cop. And you're just like, ew. Yeah, that's the story. That's him.
Yeah, I think it's that point Charlie made about it. It was the community. I'm just looking at it here. I didn't realize that the first book came out in 1997, which, if it had been huge at the time, like I would have been 14, like I probably would have been firmly in the zone for that. But I think it's as you said, Charlie, it's that it got picked up by Tumblr and sort of internet culture, and it created a community in a way that, I was in 1997, I was a huge Star Wars fan because of the reissues of that, and the internet and sort of internet community was very much in its infancy at that point. So there was a community around it, but not nearly anything like there could be even 5-10 years later. And I think that's one of the things that, whilst I'm not a huge fan of the books or the films as media, I can see why people are so angry, and I'm sort of angry on everybody's behalf of how there's been this amazing community that's given lots of people really positive stuff, and it's just been poisoned from the creator. I don't think I've ever seen that before. I don't think I've ever seen anything like that.
The films have made the author a billionaire, and you can't undo that. But the reputational damage is just absolutely breathtaking to behold. They're always going to be a billionaire. There's no way they stop being a billionaire. But when it was an Irish comedian, comic writer, like losing his wife and kids because he couldn't stop being transphobic, you got to laugh at that. It's funny. But when it's like, this is a billionaire who is more than willing to take action, it's like, oh shit. Does anyone know the spell to make a guillotine?
Yeah, I was going to say there is one way we can stop it from being a billionaire, but I think it would keep all of our Twitter accounts banned.
I'm impressed that we all had that thought at the same time.
There was just a very, very quiet sound of schnicked going on in the background of everyone's brains. Okay, so
at the same time every day.
So I think the last Harry Potter movies were like 2011, something like that. And there's been various franchising, and the franchising is where the money is these days. Everybody buys the stuff. I got you see kids these days who are wearing Hogwarts stuff, and you're just like, okay, sure. I mean, it's a well-established cultural phenomenon. It still gets referenced, although I suspect it's not going to get referenced as much in the future because of the relationship to the author and their views. And so obviously we all sat down last week and subjecting ourselves to 2.5 hours of pure J.K. Rowling screenplay. And I think we should really start there, because this is the first film J.K. Rowling has ever written. She did not write any of the original series. She wrote the books for it, but professional screenwriters wrote the series, whereas she wrote this all by herself. And boy, does it show.
Yeah, I would love to talk about how this film really opens up showing its hand immediately of how bad it's going to be, when some of the first information we learn is two of the biggest things that happen at the end of the last movie is that Credence dies and one of the main characters has his memory wiped completely. And then those two things are immediately undone within, I think, the first 10 or 20 minutes of the film, which really sets a tone of the film, which is like none of the decisions that happen in this film will ever matter at any point.
It's a classic example of that sort of weightless, that weightlessness in film, of none of the decisions that seem to be made have any kind of weight or importance. Like, they do just seem to be decisions being made by characters or made as part of the script purely to move the script along. In what direction, I've got no idea, because this film is so messy.
Yeah,
I think it is. Yeah, you see, the film opens with Johnny Depp in Wizard Guantanamo Bay, having had his tongue removed because he kept convincing the guards that something, and you see him being held in a restraint position and being transferred like he's Hannibal Lecter, and you're just like, yes, this is the bad guy who has been imprisoned and tortured. That is the bad guy. You can tell he's the bad guy because people keep pointing at him and saying, that's the bad guy. And yet the first things you see is, the good guys going, oh yeah, we've totally tortured this guy, and we're going to treat him like shit because, we're the good guys. We get away with this sort of thing all the time.
It was deeply unsettling to watch that. I found that really quite upsetting from the jump, to see in what's meant to be a child's film depictions of essentially a black site. Like, this person is being tortured, and this is being shown as being a good thing. And I, as someone coming into this pretty cold, I was like, is this like the big bait and switch here? And that, what if the establishment are actually the bad guys because they've got, like torture centers? But no, that was not what happened.
So yeah, he gets Johnny Depp, who looks like, I'm not sure if Cassie and Charlie will have seen it, but if you've ever seen the movie Cool Runnings, where
Yes.
they acclimatize the Jamaican guys by putting them in the freezer, like Johnny Depp looks like he's been put in a deep freeze for about 6 to 8 hours.
I think he looks like Macklemore halfway through a transformation into a lizard, personally.
It's almost, are they going for he's an albino and therefore, like, was that the thing?
Yo, he spent most of the last movie as Colin Firth. Like, yeah, he reveals himself at the end to be Grindelwald, and everyone's like, "Oh my god, it's Grindelwald!" And it's just like, I don't. You know what? I would rather have seen Colin Firth do this movie. I think it would have been more interesting. He's a far more interesting actor.
So he transitions into Johnny Depp.
Yes, and I would also like to say about that film, which is they don't hide that plot twist very well, because they give Colin Firth and Johnny Depp the same haircut and show you Johnny Depp right at the start of the film. So just a true cavalcade of terrible writing decisions.
Okay, so we're barely into this. We're not going to do a full plot recap here, especially not of the first movie. But So Johnny Depp escapes, and because he doesn't want to have to go to family court or whatever it is they're taking him to. Johnny Depp escapes, and then we cut to everybody's favorite two-dimensional Ed Sheeran, Eddie Redmayne, who is the protagonist of the movie. And I'm going to say that now because you would not fucking know he was the protagonist of the movie unless I told you. This is like 15 minutes into the whole movie, and you have to kind of go, oh yeah, I remember him. He's the guy the movie's supposed to be about. Ross and I had a discussion about this, and we realized that you could replace Eddie Redmayne, Scaramancer, whatever his name is. You could replace him with a little robot that goes beep beep, and almost nothing in the movie would change.
I think you could do that with at least half the cast of the movie. Like the film really feels like what you're watching Game of Thrones, where like I feel like you follow some characters' plots and you're like, I'm not that interested in these guys, but there is a character coming up who I'm interested in. But if you weren't interested in none of the characters, and it just keeps switching, and you're like, oh, it's them again.
I just could not keep up with all of the characters, and it doesn't help. Well, if you're going to have a densely plotted ensemble film, there are certain, and again, I'm not a film nerd here, but I believe there are certain tips and tricks that you can employ to make these characters quite memorable and distinct from each other, like with costuming choices and with the plotting and things, but I found it was almost identically sad-haired white guys in overcoats, or sort of lacquer-haired, sad-looking women in overcoats, and I just couldn't. I couldn't tell the difference between them, and I didn't care. And I hated that.
Only way you could tell that Eddie Redmayne was in this movie is because he was the only one who was acting like he was autistic on purpose. Like he has literally said in interviews, yeah, I think that Newt's more like Aspie, like on the spectrum, and it's like, why?
What? I did not like that.
No, it was like there was a whole sequence, and I was just looking, going, is he doing that on purpose? Is that a choice? Has that been written into the movie? Because it's just, again, it's this. We want to make this character interesting and relatable, so we're gonna, make sure that they have Asperger's or something. Because if he doesn't have that, then he would just become another man in grey coat, hat, grimly talking about things and talking about how sensible everything is. Again, what do you guys think? Like, honestly, what the fuck?
I mentioned to Charlie that I think after the Danish Girl, Eddie Redmayne decided he was going to become the Thanos and collect minority performance.
Oh my god!
So terrified for whatever happens next.
Oh no!
No, I actually watched The Danish Girl recently for a film class, and watching that and this movie, I've just realized that Eddie Redmayne is just a really bland actor. Like, he's not good. The only way he can seem good is to play a minority and be praised for playing a minority.
I think that there was something, because I remember watching it. I've got it in my notes about, is he playing this character as autistic, and saw some interviews where he said, oh, it wasn't a sort of conscious, the character isn't written that way, but I decided to play that. And I thought that feels sort of very telling with Rowling's sort of attitude towards any kind of diversity, whereby I think like inclusion and sort of, there needs to be characters that tell these stories, and I think that's really important, but it needs to be done with a little bit of sensitivity. So if the character had been specifically written to be autistic, and that had been done with some direction from autistic people, that would have been fantastic. Great. Let's have more of that sort of representation. But sort of Eddie Redmayne being like, well, I read this and the character seemed a bit awkward, and I suggested this to this person who's not a huge fan of minorities that aren't billionaires, and she was like, yeah, it sounds great, go for it. And I thought, that feels very cheap to me.
Well, we know that it wasn't in the original script, because if J.K. Rowling had intended Newt Scamander to be autistic, he'd be called Eye Contact Rain Man. I'm sorry, that's just this is how this works. We know that, you know, that's how she names characters.
Sorry, my favorite bit with the was Ross had his mic muted, but I could hear his laugh from your microphone.
I frightened the dog.
You know, it's just there is no subtlety. There's no subtlety. There's no nuance here, and that is something that plagues this whole movie. And like Cassie said, like the next bit is like Newt is summoned to the Ministry of Magic, and you get the shot of the same place that you see 70 years later in the Harry Potter movies. So nothing changes in this world over 70 years, which we'll come back to a little bit later. But he gets summoned to a meeting, and they're just like, "Oh, sup, you want to go abroad? You've got to hunt down that guy you thought was dead but isn't dead." And he's like, "Oh, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that because you want to hunt him down and kill him, and I don't want to do that." And they're like, "Fine, you're not going anywhere." And it's just like, I think there's then a scene with his brother, who is Chad Eddie Redmayne is the best way I could describe his brother, although both of them look like wet tea towels. Who then is just like, "The time is coming for you to pick a side," and it's meant to be very serious, but it really comes out as the most pathetic kind of, "Well, are you gonna come and hang out with me, or are you gonna go and hang out with them? And I need to know this." Charlie?
I was just gonna say, like, in the same way that the world hasn't developed, neither do the characters. And that's probably like due to the fact that they don't have personalities.
It's fucking Wizard Seinfeld. No learning, no hugs.
So nothing develops at all, including the characters and the plot. Which is, you know, the things you need to develop in a film.
Yeah, like there was no, you're absolutely right. There was at no point did any of the characters finish, like we get, you know, obviously as we move through, but like there was
some of them died, and that was the end of their arc. But there wasn't any
did
growth
they,
there.
Though, like,
well, true, they might not have died.
Again, like weightless decision making. There was nothing that happened to any of the characters that didn't feel like it could be immediately reversed. And it's not just, you know, this seems to be like a big thing in films, like this real sort of low stakes, so we have to keep the franchise going, so we can't actually have any of the characters actually die or have a choice that can't be reversed. But just, yeah, like the film finishes with none of these characters having learned anything or had any kind of growth or done anything. Just it was like playing an RPG and just grinding out side quests to sort of gain some XP. Like that seemed to be all it was.
We are kind of now at the point in the movie where they cut back to Johnny Depp, who is in Paris, which looks identical to 1927 London, because every building is grey stone. The sky is a color that could be described as muskrat hide. And his followers kill a family, and he doesn't do it himself, which, you know, means that he hasn't technically committed a crime of Grindelwald. And then they go in, and because you have to see, so far all you know about Johnny Depp's character, if you're coming to this movie cold like I did, is that he has escaped from a black site where he's been tortured, and he's understandably on the run. And so they have to make sure that you know he's evil, so they get one of his followers to kill a child, like a toddler. Like, they don't show it on screen, but they you know, it's like, hey, look, these guys are definitely the bad guys. They've just killed these adults, but now they're going to kill a child.
It's just grim.
It's just like
really grim.
It's like Tarantino and Feet. I mean, like, J.K. Rowling just loves killing children. I mean, who knows what that says about her as a person? I couldn't possibly say, but like, you know, it is repeated in this movie. That, like, think about how many kids she killed in the Harry Potter series. She's got a real problem with it.
Yeah, but it's just that, that weird sort of incongruence between the main characters are not doing any kind of development whatsoever, but we will happily show like a small child just being straight up murdered, you know. And I thought, I didn't think this was a film for small children, but I did think this was a film for kids. Like, I imagine this would be the sort of film that you would take, like, I don't know, intermediate school kids to go and see. Like, that was, again, you've got the torture and black site at the beginning, and now you've got infants being murdered. I'm like, this is very unpleasant. Like, this is not fun. I actually have it in my notes, like, who is this film for? Because it's not for kids. Teenagers, I don't know, who is this in service of? And I couldn't answer that question, and that kind of bugged me. Like, who is this film for?
There's also something in this film that made me realize that the Harry Potter universe is quite cruel to kids as well, because in this film, as well as one of the Harry Potter films, is the class where they confront a boggart, which appears as your greatest fear, which is a really insane thing to force your entire class of children to do in front of each other. Like, some of them have some pretty silly ones, but as this film demonstrates, some kids have genuine trauma that their whole class gets to learn about now.
So this was something that I discovered watching this film. Like, I had never heard of a boggart before, and this, like,
speaking as a counselor,
a counselor and as a former teacher, that just the sadism of having children publicly demonstrate the thing that frightens them the most is such a such a sadistic, horrifying concept, and it again, like, really disturbed me that at no point in this creative process in the films or whatever, as you said, like, I did some research, apparently this has, like, been a thing, and it was at no point did anyone go, Christ, Joanne, actually that's really not good. Some kids are frightened of spiders, some kids are frightened of some really nasty shit, and rightly so. Is this really where we're going? The answer is yes.
It really is the comedy tragedy masks in that scene as well, because it's like, young Newt Scamander doesn't want to go to a desk job, and so he turns, he does the spell and turns it into a creature, and you're just saying, oh yes, because that's him. And then you've got the actor playing Zoe Kravitz, but younger, and there's just this kind of what looks like a poached egg, and you're just like, the fuck is that? And later you find out what it is, and then you're just like, that's fucking sick, bro. That's like, hey, look, he's afraid of a desk job, and then it's like, hey, Zoe Kravitz is afraid of something else. And I also I didn't realize, like, because I haven't seen the first movie, I didn't realize that Zoe Kravitz's character is introduced in this film, because the way that they're introduced, it's like you should know who they are and give a fuck about them, and that just never lands. Like, it might be that Zoe Kravitz isn't a great actor, I don't know. It is because the script is bad, but I thought they were in the first movie, because the way that they were introduced was, oh yeah, you know her, she's that character, and you're just like, I don't know who she is, and why do I care? Because she's barely interacting with the protagonist, who isn't the protagonist. However, rather than get into the weeds, the next bit of the movie is good because it introduces the only person in this movie who appears to be having any fun whatsoever, which is Jude Law. And I am now getting a squirt bottle. I'm squirting myself with the squirt bottle to cool myself down.
Magical daddy.
Yeah, God damn, that man has aged well. Oh, in that 3-piece suit, like, with the he's got me, man. He's got me. like Dumbledore dad has got me down bad. Like, seriously, he's hot. There's nothing I can do about it.
Are we going to spend the rest of this talking about how much you're horny for Jude Law? I'm not going to call him Dumbledore.
He's so fucking dreamy.
I refuse.
But it turns out that the whole first movie was because Dumbledore sent Newt Scamander to America. So again, like Cassie was saying earlier, and as Charlie and Ross have also pointed out, it means that the entire first film was at the behest of a character who you don't meet until the second movie. But that doesn't, there's no reference to it. You know what I mean? It's just like, he's like, I'm not sure what Redmayne says. It's just like, oh yeah, but you knew what you were doing when you sent me to New York, and you're meant to go, he's been behind it all. And you're like, this is a movie that's called Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. And it has rapidly turned into Daddy Dumbledore sends his twinks out to do his bidding. And while that's a completely different movie and one that, may get made one day, I don't understand how it links into anything else. Because he's just like, oh yeah, that baby, that guy you met in the first movie who was evil and then died but didn't. Yeah, we need to find him because he's actually massively important to everything, because we think he's this bad character's lost son, maybe. And you just go, wait.
So me, idiot. I was like, oh, so he has to go and find the Grindelwald guy. And it's like, no, it's some other entirely different magical bad dude. Yeah, like even
oh, sorry.
I was like, even the exposition is bad. Like even the here we're going to explain the plot to you, and I was like, please explain. Can you explain that again? Because I didn't get it.
It was actually one of the worst things about the first film, which is that character. The whole thing about him was he's some magical creature, and the film looks down the barrel of the camera and says, the thing about this creature is it can't be someone of this certain age. And because Credence is that age, he can't be the creature. But then the plot twist is he is that creature, because they think plot twists are just lying to the audience so that you can reveal it later. And the fact that they did that in the first movie and then thought we were just desperate for more Credence content is insane, because he's the worst character. He does nothing.
Cassie, this sort of abuse of Ezra Miller gets you a chair to the forehead if the Hawaii police are to be believed.
Well, I will take it.
Yeah, Redmayne gets his quest. It's like, you've got to go and find the guy who can't act from the first movie, who still can't act in this movie. Oh, and Johnny Depp's after him as well. I don't know. And at that point, oh man, do we have to? Okay, this is the bit where some of the characters from the last film come in, and it's Queenie Goldstein, probably an ancestor of Anthony Goldstein, the only Jewish wizard at Hogwarts.
Name alert.
Deep sigh. And her American comic relief husband by not Josh Gad, because they couldn't afford him. And this is, I've written here that this scene is played like something David Lynch would do if he'd been hit on the head by an anvil, because the human guy has been enchanted to be in love with her, and he's like completely fucking out of it. He's like he's wizard rehypnoled at this point, and he's like trying to eat his dinner and failing miserably, and Newt's just like, yo, what the fuck is going on here? And this is played as a comic scene. It's like, haha, the fat man can't eat his food because he's been enchanted by the witch lady. And you're just like, again, there is a level of cruelty and not thinking beyond the surface of this to explain anything at all, where there's just no, what are the consequences of that? Like in a relationship, if your partner like fucking enchants you to love them and drags you from your country across the ocean to another country, that there's no thought there. And that is, I have here underlined twice, feminism. And that's kind of like, oh my God, Charlie, please take this off me.
Sorry, I have a slight correction that doesn't actually mean much for the plot, but kind of shows how badly it was written that it's so confusing. Okay. I'm pretty sure the American guy was just in love with her, and he was enchanted to want to marry her because wizards and non-wizards were it was illegal for him to marry.
Yes, because it's an analogy for American racism, because JK is so good at that. So to do the analogy about racism, she has two white people.
Yeah. So
because this film has a wealth of black people and people of color in it. It's got Zoe Kravitz and I don't know the actor's name, but he plays Yusef Kama a little bit later, and those are your kind of two kind of good guys. I'm not going to count the Asian actor who's playing the genie, because she basically doesn't exist as a character in the movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah. He was only there to drive Credence forward.
Yeah, and then immediately get abandoned. Yes, Ross.
Yeah, I found that the sort of the love potion, love spell scene really, again, it's that like the it's still coming back to this idea that here is a world that the protagonists are attempting to fight to maintain the status quo, and the status quo has the equivalent of miscegenation laws, and that sort of the equivalent of sort of like a date rape drug is how you overcome that. And at no point does anyone go, do any of the protagonists go, hang on, this law does not seem fair, this does not seem right? And this sort of ties in with what I know about Harry Potter lore, that there's very little, here is a system that needs to be addressed. We've got slavery, there's slaves in the film.
Oh, we are coming to that fucking bit.
And again, it's never questioned. You've got miscegenation laws, and it's never like, wow, that seems really unfair. Apart from when a bad guy says, or the bad guy says, "Oh, this we could, this is something that we could do something about," and that's seen as a bad thing. Like, Rowling's
hold off. We know what's coming down the line on this one, but
Rowling's obsession with better things aren't possible is just, it's pathological. It's incredible.
Speaking of better things aren't possible, we then jump to Ezra Miller, who is not acting in this movie. He is just looking slightly sad all the time with a haircut that makes him look like a member of a new rave band from the mid-2000s. And J.K. Rowling knows a little bit of history, and she's like, hey, you know what people used to have? They used to have human zoos. And we're going to have a human zoo in our movie, and it's where we're going to introduce Credence Barebones, or should we call him Plot Forwardus, or whatever his name is. And also, we're introduced to someone he's meant to be kind of emotionally attached to, who's also that giant snake that the Harry Potter cuts the head off, I think, in the movies. Cassie?
I was going to wait until you were done with that thing, but I need to bring up one of the worst cases of world building I've ever seen in a franchise ever.
Let's go.
Because in this scene, they're at a circus of these like fantastical creatures, and one of them is a woman who turns into a snake, and like the audience is packed and they're super excited to watch her turn into a snake. When we know that in Hogwarts, like in the second year of their wizarding school, they learn how to turn people into animals, and we're meant to believe that this is something that like would pull in a crowd of wizards when it's essentially like learning basic addition to them. I was losing my mind when the film was going.
Come and see Barney the Purple Dinosaur. Add 2 + 2.
Now I would see.
That would fucking work. Yeah, it's incredible that this kind of gets kind of slotted in as a, well, he's working for this thing. Actually, there was something I noticed about the movie that the director did. You know how I said that everything was really grey and fucking horrible in this world? Like, when they're in the human world, everything's grey, dull, horrible. There's the scene where the statue, to kind of let you into the wizardy bit, kind of opens, and the screen is full of color for the first time, like for the circus and stuff. And you've got the kid in the bubble, and there's all this fucking shit going off. And and I was just like, oh, there's the color palette. Oh, the director is telling us the only real color and life in the world is in the wizarding world. And I'm just like, that's some not very subtle kind of propaganda for the wizarding world of Harry Potter that they're setting up, isn't it? And that might be a thing that actually happened, or it might just have been an accident. I don't know.
You're right, but also it didn't last, because we noticed this, and I was like, wow, that's not a very sort of subtle commentary on how, on this. But then I couldn't tell when, but beyond that one bit, I couldn't tell when they were in the magical wizardy spaces and when they were in the non-magical wizardy spaces, because the color palette of this film makes a Marvel film look like look like Pocoyo. It is the drabbest fucking film. And this is another thing that really wound me up, is you've got this concept of like limitless imagination. You've got the concept of magic, which can do absolutely anything. And yet it is so drab. This is a film of olives and grays and the occasional bit of orange when there's some magic happening. But it's just you could take a still from this film and go, is this a sort of mid-90s film about, like the Bosnian conflict? And you would not be able to tell the difference. It's just drab and grey and just miserable looking. I was like, if you're going to create a magical world with all of this stuff, have some fun with it, for fuck's sake.
It also feels super like inconsistent with its magic. Like in that first scene of the film is Grindelwald getting taken away in this caravan, because I guess that's the only way they can transport him. But then for the entire rest of the film, every character is teleporting somewhere like every 2 minutes. And it's like, could they not figure out magic to teleport him to the prison? Is teleporting only applicable when it's convenient to the plot?
Yes, it is, because J.K. Rowling is a dreadful writer, an even worse screenwriter. We then go to the Tina Goldstein turns up, name alert. And we go to the French Ministry of Magic, and they're kind of just like, I think her sister's looking for her or something. And in the background, we see that Credence has taken a Polyjuice potion and is pretending to be a woman. And that's how you know he's bad, because he's a dude pretending to be a woman. Everybody make a note of this in your books. And he steals some stuff that tells him who his adoption papers were signed by, because for some reason they have those, I think, in the French Ministry of Magic. Again, this film does not explain a lot. It just kind of shows you some shit and asks you to work it out. And we in my book here, I've got the words "oh no" written in capitals. They take up about half the page and they're underlined twice. So Credence and the Snake Lady go to this house, and upstairs there is a lady, an old short lady with quite long fingers and hands. Her name is Irma Dogood. Again, name alert. And she was a servant to the family of which Ezra Miller's character is meant to be the long lost son of. And the thing about her being a servant is that she is a half elf. And if you recall everything that we know about the Wizarding World and house elves, that means her mother was a slave. And yeah, oh no, underlined many times. But it's okay, because that character is just there to very briefly say, oh, you were such a nice baby, and yes, you were on the boat, and you are this person you think you are, before she gets immediately killed before anyone can be like, so how do you exist? Yeah, they're like immediately killed and shit. And the casual way Rowling introduces characters with not a single fucking thought in that fucking head about what the existence of such a character implies for the general world is not just astonishing, it's fucking criminal. Like, Stephen King was coked out of his fucking mind in the 80s and wrote some books which have great ideas and stories in them, but are shit to read. The Tommyknockers, he hates it, and I agree with him. It's got a good story. But even he didn't show such a casual disregard for like the worlds that he himself was creating. And at least he managed to do lots of drugs at the same time. Rowling's got no excuse. And yet it's just like, oh yeah, this kid is like half house elf slave, which means, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Anyway, we have to go to next location.
Yeah, this was the point, I think, when I actually stopped taking notes, because I was, again, I didn't expect to be as upset by this film as I was, and it was just this point where it was, you have a slave class which is deeply problematic in and of itself, and now you have a half slave class, half human plot point, like, that solely exists for exposition. That didn't need to exist at all.
This woman loves blood quantum. She fucking loves it. She loves bloodlines. She loves birthrights. She loves, this is what you're born to do. She fucking loves this shit. I have no idea how nobody realized that she basically, instead of hands, has 2 pairs of calipers.
Yeah, like I've literally, like, one of my last notes is, what is JK's obsession with short people in positions of servitude? And then when I realized what was being implied here, and it doesn't serve any point. Like, you're implying something of deep cruelty and sexual coercion at best. And I don't want to turn this into sort of trauma hour, but I was like, for people who know the lore, and clearly I know more about it than I thought I did, I was just like, that's such a horrible, unnecessarily cruel thing to put in there. Why would you do that? Who is that for? What are you trying to say? Like, everything in a film is a choice. Every single decision that you make is being made consciously at some level. Why? Why is that character there? Why are they showing this? And then they just kill that character. They just kill them.
Yeah, because
no further questions.
They fulfilled their use in the film. And the cool thing about this is it doesn't even matter, because there's another one of, as Cassie has pointed out, a plot twist that is not a plot twist. It's just like, hey, we've just made up some extra bullshit here coming later, which just means that none of this fucking matters. So it's just presenting cruelty and horribleness because we need to get from one location to another in the movie.
Also, maybe one of the cruelest lines I've ever seen in a film, where after that happens, Grindelwald asks how Credence took it, and the response is he's sensitive to seeing the only member of his family alive, like, immediately die after meeting them. Also, Charlie, please say the thing that you sent me.
When you guys were saying that Stephen King was like on drugs and J.K. Rowling doesn't even have that excuse, I said, why have drugs when you can have brainworms?
Well,
yes.
Stephen King notably pro-trans rights, and I will diverge from the bit where, like, J.K. Rowling was like, yeah, I really admire his work, and someone's like, hey Stephen, what do you think about trans people? He goes, trans people rule, and she unfollowed him on Twitter. It's like, honestly, cocaine apparently excellent brainworms preventative.
What a thug it.
I just fucking love it, man. It's just so bad. Okay, so there's like the other black character in the movie who isn't Zoe Kravitz kidnaps Newt and comedy sidekick Josh Gad, who's not Josh Gad, and then immediately drops dead because he's got brainworms, which is great. He's got brainworms, right? It's not just me. Like they have to get those worms out of his eyes later or something.
Oh, God, there's so much in this film that, like,
that doesn't fucking matter. Yeah.
Yeah.
But, and yeah, like, and I don't know, we go back to Hogwarts and the Ministry turn up and they try and threaten Jude Law, who's looking fine as hell, and they put him in some magic handcuffs, and he's like, oh hell yeah.
I'm down.
Look, he's just a good looking man. It's just a good looking man. And yeah, I've just written, he's the only one in this movie who's having fun at all. And he even does the Star Wars line. Your policies of suppression and violence are pushing supporters to his cause. And you're like, oh, cool. The tighter you grip, the more slip through your fingers. And I'm just like, how earlier we were talking about how they don't treat any ministries of magic like they're bad people. Like, they can do torture and it's like, yeah, sure, whatever, we'll take his tongue out, or we'll send a guy to kill this dude and that's fine. Like, doing a fucking drone strike with a wizard is fine. The movie does try in a really kind of Play-Doh, like, fun factory way to make it seem like the established institutions are pretty fucking bad. Grindelwald's worse, and in the middle are like about 4 people who have the choice on which side gets to win. And yet it never defines it in any way that, they're like, well, I'd rather have these shit things than the shit things that are being offered to me, without ever really, without ever really going beyond, as I've said before, more than like a micron's depth of understanding, And that obviously comes to a conclusion at the end of the film where no, not there yet. But yeah, there's like that whole bit about, this is also the scene with Jude Law where he implies that he's gay for Johnny Depp. but he doesn't actually say anything. It's just kind of, oh, we were very close. Longing look.
Just
And
the
everyone's just like,
weakest of queer baiting.
yeah, it's
Not only queerbaiting, but to have your first ever gay character committed to screen and being like, yeah, he was in love with the bad guy in the film who's very bad and killed a child.
oh yeah, he can't fight Wizard Hitler because they're gay for each other. It's like that's a representative line, you know. Yeah, I'd love to stop like Wizard Hitler, but I'm gay for him, so I can't. And it's just like, and we're not thinking about what that says about queer love. We're not going to talk about that. We're not going to talk about that at all. It's just, yeah, like there was this summer and we were really hot for each other. So yeah, he's gonna just have to kill lots of people because I want to fuck him too much. And like seriously, like, and everyone's just like, oh my god, gay representation. It's like, this is horrendous. It's just, like, no.
Yeah, there's a whole like there's whole sort of PhD thesis that could be written about like the queer representation in this movie and how like the only queer hinted relationship in the entire universe is such that it renders one of them is the worst person ever and one of them is a good guy, but he's rendered completely incapable as a result of this relationship. And it's like again, it's that line from Garth Marenghi, you know, I know writers who use subtext and they're all cowards. You know, there's no subtext here. It's right there on screen, but it easily cut for audiences where that sort of thing is unacceptable. And oh my god.
There was also like a scene coming up, like Ross mentioned it earlier, about the fact that Johnny Depp exploits Queenie Goldstein's love of the human guy, the non-magic guy, and says, hey, you know, if I was in charge, then we wouldn't have like these rules that segregate like wizards and witches from like normal human beings. So you should probably kind of join me. And it is like we said, it's like his whole character's motivation is, oh, he's tricking her by saying that she should be able to marry someone who's not magic. And it's like, he's not. He's just saying something that she wants and is obviously fair and okay. But the movie sets it up as, oh, he's so wily.
I think this is the scene where my silly little trans allegory comes in.
I don't think it's silly at all, Charlie.
I've said it to people so many times at this point that I don't even think it's funny anymore. But other people still do. So I'll share it for the pod. Basically, Cassie and I were trying to figure out what the actual crimes of Grindelwald were. And I was like, well, the only crime I've actually seen is him wanting wizards to be equal with humans. And, you know, the wizard council not liking that. And I was like, you know who else is hated just for wanting to be equal with others? Trans people. And that is the entire allegory.
And you know what, it holds up and has more consistency and makes more sense than anything else in the film. And I think, yeah, like it again, I'm not a comics books nerd, but but I know that like I've seen enough of the X-Men films, and at least, you know, when you've got Sir Ian McKellen playing Magneto, yeah, he's meant to be the bad guy, but also you get a real sense that this is someone with a great moral purpose who is doing things for what I think are the right reasons. And again, there's that very strong sort of allegory of here's a minority who are feared and hated, who really just want nothing more than to be left alone. And sometimes you can't defeat like genocidal arguments in the marketplace of ideas. You know, like eventually you're gonna have to get a bit aggro about it. And yeah, you're right, like Grindelwald is kind of making the point, although he's making the point that you know, wizarding people are sort of hiding in the shadows and everything else. They also seem to have an awful lot of power, and it's a weird, again, it's a sort of internal inconsistency whereby it's like, oh, wizards have to hide themselves away and everything else. It's like that seems entirely like internally driven. Like that, it doesn't seem. I don't know. I mean, I don't understand the lore properly, but I don't really understand why wizards, they seem to have this real sort of like a superiority complex with like all muggles and everything else. And it's like, is the phone call coming from inside the house here? Like, why aren't they? It's not like they are a minority or a repressed group. Why aren't they able to be part of the world? Like, I don't get it. So maybe I'm missing something here.
There was actually a follow-up to Charlie's trans allegory here, or analogy, which is obviously earlier in the movie we saw Ezra Miller polyjuice into being a woman to do bad things, and later in the movie Newt transforms into his brother to do good things. Cassie, was it you or Charlie who were just dying in the group chat about this, about the quote where he's like with Zoe Kravitz, his character, and they're trying to steal some stuff, and he has literally taken a potion to turn into his brother. So he now looks like his brother. He looks like the actor playing his brother. And then, okay, Cassie, was it you or Charlie who did this?
It was me.
Cassie, what happens?
He takes a polyjuice potion to look like his brother and turns to Goldstein, whatever her name is, and he says, "Now I'm disguised as my brother because he works here. My brother, remember that. He looks like this." And then they go inside and it wears off and he sees his brother and then turns back to the same person and goes, "That's my brother." After just being him for at least 10 minutes.
It's like it's like, he's currently I think he looks at his brother, sees him, but it's him disguised as his brother. So as far as his brother knows, he just walked into the workplace. He looks down and there's him. And then he's just like, what the? And just the fact that he has to say, "Oh, there's my brother up there." It's like, yeah, no shit, dude. It's like he looks just like you.
Yeah, they told J.K. Rowling she could clarify one thing about the plot inside the film, and that was the moment she picked.
So they have to steal some shit, some records, some family stuff because, Ezra Miller's character is meant to be Zoe Kravitz's long lost half brother, and we go to a tomb or something because it's all about bloodlines, and this is like, I watched the movie and I was making the bed the next day when like a little ping noise went off in my brain, and I realized exactly what the movie is telling you. Because they go down there and the other person of color in the movie, the other black character in the movie, turns up and is like, "Yeah, I got to kill this motherfucker because I promised my dad." And then he explains a backstory, which is the counterpart to the enchantment about getting married from earlier, which is bad wizard man who is white and French puts the black character's mum under a spell, forcibly impregnates her, makes her bear his child. She dies in childbirth. And this is played as well, now you know why Zoe Kravitz's character is conflicted, because she is the product of this. And yet it's also, once again, unspeakably cruel and hideous, and also kind of completely unnecessary to the plot, because this film has so many characters that just do not need to be there. So they're there in this tomb, and the character Yusuf Khan is just like, "Yeah, I'm gonna fucking murk you, bro. I'm gonna kill you." And Zoe Kravitz is like, "No, you can't, because he isn't my brother." And then we get a flashback scene. We get a flashback scene, and they're like on this boat going across the Atlantic, and the baby brother of the half brother is crying, and so Zoe Kravitz, his character, swaps it with the baby from across the hall who doesn't cry, and then the boat sinks, and Zoe Kravitz and the baby she has stolen from across the hall survive with the half elf nanny who was conceived via Oh God knows what means. They survive, but the baby across the hall, her half brother, drowns, and you get this shot of what looks like a poached egg dropping down into the water, which means that earlier in the movie, the thing that she feared most is a child that she ensured died. Now, if you're following the internal logic of this movie, and God help you if you are, that kind of puts Zoe Kravitz's character on a par with Grindelwald already, which is foreshadowing about some stuff that might happen later. But oh my God, it's so fucking stupid. Like, it's so dumb. Because what this implies is, and there's the big reveal at the end of the movie, who gives a fuck? It implies that on this boat going across the Atlantic, the magical world, which is seen as a rare and special people, and there's not many of them, it just so happened that in opposing corridors were two babies from two huge wizarding families being secreted away across the Atlantic at exactly the same fucking time. And like, oh, it's just fucking dumb. It's so dumb, and you're not meant to think about it. You're not meant to worry about it. You're not meant to worry about Zoe Kravitz's character being equivalent of like a slave being raped. You're not meant to think about it. You're not meant to think about the idea of a French wizard doing that to a black woman and what that means in the terms of French, because you're not meant to think about it beyond the surface level. It's just meant to be, oh, that's very sad, but come on, we need to go to the next location. And this movie does it again and again, where it reveals that the world that J.K. Rowling has created inside her mind is fucking hideous. Like, it's as ugly as shit. The way that it treats people, the way that it treats anyone at all. Like, the good guys are never good guys, but the people that are treated like shit are never the bad guys. They're just people that are seen as inconsequential, because she obviously thinks that if you're not important, then you don't matter at all, or how you get there doesn't matter, and how it relates to anything doesn't matter, because she's in charge of whatever passes for a plot in these fucking hideous films. I'm just going to go and get another beer. You guys, carry on.
It's also just such like a tonally jarring moment of the film. Like, there's been a thing on Twitter, I think the last week or so, with some stupid idiot did a review of Turning Red, which is a kids film, and mentions that like it's weird that the film doesn't tie into 9/11 at all. And it really feels like that, where you're just watching a film and then the film pulls you in close and goes, think about an awful, awful tragedy for a second. Now let's get back to the plot. And it's like, I can't actually. I think I'm going to sit in the awful, awful shit you just exposed to me.
Yeah. It's, let's say this film is deeply, like, ideologically very suspect and cruel and callous. And I think I think we shouldn't shy away from big themes, and I certainly don't think kids should shy away from, like, kids films shouldn't shy away from big themes. And Lord knows, like, there was enough films that released when I was a kid. Like, I still remember seeing the live action adaptation of The Witches as a small child, far too young to watch that, and being so terrified that I nearly wet myself in the cinema at one point. Like, it was, again, Roald Dahl, like some seriously nasty shit going on in his films, and a deeply suspect kind of guy. But like, there's something about Rowling's attitudes towards people who are not the main character, like, say, this really sort of callous attitude towards trauma, this sort of real sadistic attitude towards people who she does not deem important. And I just I actually think it's a real credit to everyone who has been a Harry Potter fan, who's grown up with it, who turned something that is so callous and so unpleasant into something that was so great. I think, I hear about people who are big Potter fans and what it meant to them, and the importance that it had. And I'm like, it's a real showing of how good, like, fandom can, again, I'm not a scholar of this, like, fandom can be, whereby you can turn something that is so bitter into something that is so good.
Also, give a shout out to the H.P. Lovecraft fan base for that same thing, where they've all and unanimously turned against the creator for the awful human being that he was, but still gone on to create.
Yeah,
fantastic
Howard
work
fucking
inspired.
sucks, man.
Yeah, for sure.
I love Lovecraft's work. I love the mythology. I love everything apart from the fucking racism it's drenched in. But the fact that the H.P. Lovecraft fandom and people who love his work have just gone, nah, man, this like Cthulhu and all this shit, it fucking whips. We love it. But also, like, Howard, go fuck yourself, man. Like, everyone fucking hates Howard. It's so good.
He was not a good guy. Yeah. And it's as we were saying when you left, like, you know, like Roald Dahl and stuff. Like, there's kids should be exposed to big themes. They should be exposed to things that make them question the world. And I think that's really good. I don't think Rowling does that. I think she again, like the overarching theme of her work seems to be better things aren't possible. And the best you can possibly hope for is to end up at the top of the heap, maintaining the status quo.
Like she did.
Yeah.
It is like, I mean, the plot twist I described before having a complete meltdown and going for another drink. The plot twist actually renders...
It's your emotional support beer.
It renders like the majority of the film completely inconsequential. It means that the main character's quest has actually been for nothing, because his job was to find Ezra Miller's character because they thought it was this person. And then, like, I think 15, 20 minutes out from the end of the movie, you find out, no, everyone is fucking wrong. It's not the person you think it is, because of the deep, dark secret held by Zoe Kravitz, who was introduced in this movie and barely has enough scenes for you to get to know who she actually is. Apart from that, she's conflicted and troubled because she was in Slytherin, and that's the bad guys.
What if your MacGuffin was just a little guy?
It's just a little birthday boy.
Charlie.
I have a note about who Credence actually is, but it kind of goes into the third film, but I think it really shows how bad J.K. Rowling is at thinking ahead in her world building.
Let's go.
So, I was going to say spoiler warning, but no one's going to watch the third film. So basically, Credence is actually like Dumbledore's nephew. And like, it was definitely thought of as just like a random plot twist kind of thing, because, you know, J.K. Rowling seems to pride herself on, you know, thinking ahead and having all these different character connections and these vast family trees. But in the original series, there was never any mention of him having a nephew at all. And I feel like that would be brought up at least once if she was actually planning to go into all of this stuff and, you know, have the past and everything.
Yeah.
So yeah, she's just not good at world building.
It suffers a lot from it's not the same, but it's similar with what happened to Star Wars. Again, when I was growing up, I was such a huge Star Wars fan. I'm not even going to apologize for it. Like the transmasculine urge to sort of build little X-wings and play 90s sort of low res games. But like, you have the potential to create this incredible world that is unlike anything that exists and populate it with all manner of exciting people. And the later films become obsessed with, like, again, this weird sort of eugenics-y bloodlines, you know, like only one or two families. And it's just like this sort of this complete lack of imagination whereby we must fixate on like one or two power families. And it's so lazy and it just takes you out of it. Like, I don't care about these people. I'm not invested enough as to, like, you know, like this kind of just weird genealogy stuff. It needs to, it's such a lazy trope and it needs to stop.
There is I mean, basically the entire point of this movie, therefore, with the plot twist that the actual secret child of the bad wizard family drowned in the Atlantic Ocean, blah 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 blah. It means that this entire point of this movie is to get all of the characters in one place at one time, so that Johnny Depp can give a big speech, and that's your denouement of the movie. Oh
God, here we go.
Now this is a universe in which World War I has canonically taken place. You know, the horrors of the Western Front, Gallipoli, all of that. It happened, man.
and
Wizards fought in World War One, apparently. Like Newt's brother's like a World War One hero.
Which is weird because this takes place like 9 years after the armistice, and he does not look older than 25. But I digress.
So Johnny Depp has got all of his supporters together, and he's giving a big speech in this kind of big Roman auditorium thing, and there's lots of people there, and actually the crowd is actually more diverse than the entire rest of the movie, which I found very interesting. And
just you're among friends here. Just say what's in your heart.
So Johnny Depp, Gillett Grindelwald, he's got this incredibly sick fucking bong. Like this thing, like back at university, I'd have been all over that. You'd have been buying it from like a shop like that sold those big wall hangings with wolves on it and stuff. And it's a skull and a big pipe. And he starts puffing on the shit that killed Hitler. And to show everybody that wizards kind of revealing themselves is a good thing, he says, look, I don't want to fight the non-magical people, the muggles. I don't want to fight them. But if we reveal ourselves, we can stop this. And he smokes up like this big, everyone has a trip, and there are fucking Spitfires and Messerschmitts going through the air. There are like Dresden on fire, armies marching, like what looks like some people being marched into a concentration camp. And then the image it ends with the explosion of an atom bomb, like the full-on fucking mushroom cloud, all that shit. And then everyone's like, and he goes, that's what we're fighting. And in the crowd is Eddie Redmayne's brother and the other wizard cops. And they're like, yeah, we've got to stop him. And it was bad enough that people are like, but why did Queenie Goldstein, the woman who enchanted her husband to marry her because of miscegenation laws, why would she turn bad because the bad guy offered her an end to apartheid? That's not a good enough reason to turn bad if someone offers you an end to apartheid. The fact that we are now being told that the bad guy in this movie is the bad guy because he wants to stop World War II, the Holocaust, and the explosion of the first nuclear weapon. And we're meant to be on the side of like Dumbledore's twink army or whatever. And are you fucking insane? Like, are you an insane person, Joanne? Like, what happened to you that made you go, this will get them on side? You know what people love? They love the Holocaust. They want to defend it. They want to make sure it happens. And that is what we are left with near the end of this movie. It is the good guys have to make World War II happen because the bad guy wants to stop it.
I got some inside info from my roommate who unfathomably has gone to see the new one. And I don't know if this was always the intention or if this is something they hastily added to the new movie to try and steer the plot away from that. But apparently it's not that he wants to stop World War II and the Holocaust. It's that he's worried that wizards will also get caught up in it. So it's almost more horrifying that he's not like, I want to stop Hitler. He's more like, I want to give Hitler some notes so that we're okay.
It's that just sort of
okay, little guy. I've seen the future. I know what you're planning. By the way, love the mustache, but few notes on this. Okay, I just want to give you some constructive feedback on how we're going with this. Look, let's just say
you do not, in fact, have to hand it to him.
Yeah, fucking Johnny Depp spoiler alerting Hitler.
You know what, I knew this was coming. Like, this was part of the reason why I suggested this film in the first place. Like, I thought.
So this is your fault.
It is entirely my fault. And I was like, I'm sure that this has been overblown. Like, that it cannot be as bad as I have been led to believe, and it was worse. Like, it was legitimately worse. Like, I thought the whole the protagonists in this film are going to attempt to ensure that the Holocaust happens, and I thought that can't be. That must be some kind of like projection, or someone's like taking that. No, it's real. Shown and told, and I just I couldn't. Oh my god, I just yeah, I don't even know what you say to that, and I don't know why. There must have been hundreds of people working on this movie. It had millions of dollars put on it, and at no point did anyone lift their heads from the pile of coke long enough to go, even aside from all of the other extremely dodgy and upsetting themes in this movie, I think maybe, Joanne, you've taken this one a bit far. Like, maybe pull back on this one a little bit. And then we have the final boss, which is, it looks like, the only way I can describe it is one of those really cringy adverts for sort of cinnamon flavored vodka that you would get in like the early 2000s, or the poster for sort of like a fucking Mortal Kombat movie or something. It was pointless and silly and featured like flame dragons and ice dragons, and I stopped caring because I was still too wrapped up in the Lovecraftian horror that I had just seen.
You can really see how this movie completely broke all of our minds. In various ways. This also is the scene where Zoe Kravitz's character sacrifices herself. Not that we care about her, because we recently found out she drowned a baby, like, indirectly. I think another one of his henchmen dies as well, and everyone else survives because they need to for the next movie. And Ezra Miller goes and joins. Oh no! Oh no! You ever hear a line in a movie and you know that the author has put absolutely zero thought into the implications of that line? Like, you hear something and you just say, oh shit, you wrote that with your own brain. And yet there was a line at the point where Ezra Miller's character is going to go to the bad side. And Johnny Depp's like, yes, come and join me in my big blue circle of fire. And Ezra Miller's character talks to Snake Lady and is like, he knows who I am. And she says a line which is fucking world class. It's fucking world class. From J.K. Rowling into the keyboard, onto the big screen, out of the mouth of Ezra Miller. Oh, wait, no, it wasn't her. It was the Snake Lady. And she goes, he knows what you were born as, not who you are. And I'm just like, Joanne, are you saying that what people are born as is not necessarily what they are? Because I would like to introduce you to this author called J.K. Rowling, who you need to have a word with urgently about this understanding.
There's also the fact that isn't the whole point of this film that they don't know who he is, so they don't actually know what he was born as, truly?
Apparently so. Apparently, like, apparently Johnny Depp fucking worked it out at some point during this movie, but we didn't see that because it's an incredibly bad movie.
Yeah.
Because he didn't know in the first film, right? I'm guessing he's just like, I don't know. And they brought him back. I mean, you know how I think Charlie, you were talking about earlier about how the start of the second movie kind of reverses immediately things that happened in the first movie.
Yeah.
No, that was Cass.
That was Cass. Okay, sorry, Cass. And in this case, it was, that character didn't actually die and this guy didn't lose his memory. The fact that for the next movie, the thing that Rowling has to unscript out of what she scripted is World War II and the Holocaust is good, actually, just shows a frightening escalation. Like, I would part of me wants to see the next movie to see exactly what fucking hole she writes herself into.
No.
You know, the end of The Secrets of Dumbledore takes place in South Africa in 1949, and it's everyone having a lovely time, and it's just like, mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's crazy that they really try to position Grindelwald as this like silver-tongued, manipulative, convincing character. And the only example we have of that in the film is when he says to the woman, "Wouldn't it be cool if you could marry the guy you're in love with?" And that's his incredible manipulative tactics.
If you boil it down, his two big manipulations in this movie are: wouldn't it be cool if we weren't all fucking racist? And also, wouldn't it be cool if millions of people didn't die? And we're going to be like, boo, no, actually, this is good.
Yeah. Sorry, Charlie, I can.
Hey, Cass, would you still marry me if the only way was to follow some bad guy?
It depends on the bad guy. Wait, it depends. Are they really bad, but they're very like polite and cordial about it?
Good to know. Good to know.
I think that's
All
such
right,
a key.
moving on.
Yeah, it's such a key thing. Like he's so he's played by Mads Mikkelsen in the next film, who I would climb that man like a tree.
Down
And
boy.
I can see him as, you know, like as a character like this very sort of persuasive silver tongue, like you know, he'll get into your head and play mind games. Like the only head that Johnny Depp is playing mind games in is his own, and that game is sort of Spot the Dog. Like it's not. He doesn't come across as being like very persuasive. He doesn't come across as being terribly smart. He's, you know, he's real sort of cut price Magneto, as I said, and it's also lazy and it's also bad. And I'm like, I do not have a particularly high bar when it comes to movies. Like I really, you know, I am a big fan of films where dudes in fact rock. I enjoy films where I do not need to engage my brain that much, but I'm really forgiving. Like, there's very few movies where I'm like, I genuinely dislike this. And I genuinely disliked this, apart from Jude Law looking like he had teleported in from another film where it looked like he was having a good time. Like none of the actors looked like they were enjoying this. It didn't seem like anyone involved in the process felt like they were making anything that had any value. Just you know what, it was incredibly British. Actually, now I think about it, it was really fucking British in that everyone seemed miserable. The whole point of the film was to make sure that they were miserable but other people were more miserable. It was a great argument in favor of the status quo, even when the status quo fucking sucks. And what if we could all just be a little bit more racist? And it's like, it absolutely nailed on, like early 21st century Britain in a 2.5-hour film. Incredible stuff.
See, we were actually, you've acted like those are your closing thoughts, but there's one more scene, and it's kind of a split screen, which it can be used to good effect, but in this one, it just kind of reveals something deeply troubling about the whole series. So we cut back to Hogwarts once again, because if you cut back to Hogwarts, it makes people watching the movie go, "Oh yeah, remember when these films were good?" And Newt's there with the Twink Brigade, and Dumbledore comes like across the bridge, and they're having a chat. And Dumbledore puts his hands up, and Newt's brother takes off the sexy magic handcuffs.
Steady now.
Looks good in the suit. And he invites Newt for a cup of tea because Newt has stolen the vial of blood from the Blood Pact. But the most interesting thing about this shot is that fucking bridge, like the aqueduct kind of style bridge, is really fucking long going towards Hogwarts in this movie and incredibly badly rendered in CGI. And while Newt and Dumbledore are walking away from them, every other character who has survived the movie and isn't a bad guy is just frozen like an NPC in Skyrim. They are just stood there, and they walk away from them to have a cup of tea, and they're just kind of left there because the plot doesn't need them anymore. So they all just kind of go into default mode for a little while, like picking a fighter in Tekken. They're all just kind of sat there like doing a move, but there's no one there anymore because the plot doesn't need them. And it kind of just, the whole movie has that, where characters will just literally just stop because they are done with advancing the plot. They have no agency. There is no life outside advancing the plot. And this split screens with Johnny Depp in his big castle on a mountain in Austria, because let's do some foreshadowing. Why not? Telling Ezra Miller that he's actually a member of the Dumbledore family, and that's your plot twist, everybody. Like, not, we've had at least 3 twists in this. Well, 4. We've got the Credence isn't dead. That dude didn't get his memory wiped. Zoe Kravitz killed a baby. And now it's the guy who we killed off in the first one but brought back for this is actually secretly related to sexy Jude Law. And that's the movie. That's the end of the film. It's the end of the movie. And it's haha. Now we are set up for the next movie. And you have spent 2.5 hours of your life watching plot happen, but nobody learns or grows.
I have a note here that just says, didn't feel like there was a plot, just a setup for later films. But then later films was underlined with a lol.
Every scene of this film seems like it's the first scene of a new movie.
Yeah.
Ross and I were talking about this week, and I said, I know why these movies are so bad. And it brings it back around to what we started to talk about at the beginning. When you watch the Harry Potter movies, most people have read the books, which means that the problems with the movie you fill in with the pictures in your head. You know, you fill in the bits that are missing because you know this story already, because you've read it. You've already generated this in your mind, in your imagination. And it means that when the movie does something different, you're like, oh, that's actually surprising. You know, oh, they've changed that bit. Oh, that's okay. It still works. You know? Whereas because these don't have that underlying weight of literary knowledge to kind of propel you through a confusing grey mass of plot devices and characters who might as well just all be like The Sims at this point, that the whole thing completely loses any cohesiveness because you don't have a reason to know these characters or have spent any more time with them than you do on the screen. And the movie knows this as well. You know the movie knows this, which is why Dumbledore rocks up, which is why Nicholas Flamel from The Philosopher's Stone turns up, being played by the son of Alejandro Jodorowsky, the absolutely insane Chilean director, by the way, which is possibly the best thing in this movie after Jude Law in that suit. But the movie knows that it cannot stand on its own merits, which is why we have to keep going back to Hogwarts and seeing the characters in the movie doing the same lessons that you saw Harry Potter doing 70 years later. Because it has to go to, hey, remember this, you like this. Okay, just bear with me here, bear with me. We're building to something. This is going to be fine. Except, like you say, this movie is building towards nothing. Or rather, it builds towards Johnny Depp saying World War II and the Holocaust, very bad. The atom bomb, very bad. And you're meant to go, well, I'm not putting up with that. I'm definitely going to go and see how they stop him stopping the war in the third movie. But yeah, it literally does not hang together cohesively because it doesn't have an audience which has read beyond what is presented to them on the screen. And that's why audiences don't like it, because when you watch a Potter movie, like a Harry Potter movie, you've probably read a book, you know? And you can go, oh, yeah. I know what that character's thinking right now because I remember it because I really like reading that. You know, there's an appeal to nostalgia in these movies that is not warranted because these movies do not deserve that nostalgia, you know?
Yeah, there's so many weird choices. It's like, why the mid 1920s? Like, what an odd time to set it. what it like. It's just there's so many stylistic choices that make no sense. There's so many sort of scripting choices that make no sense. There's so much stuff in there that's needlessly cruel and, like say, like deliberately sadistic that make no sense beyond being cruel and sadistic. I just and like the concept of like a sort of Indiana Jones thing where there's an alternate universe where there's an autistic wizard in this brightly colored alternate reality that goes around like finding fantastic beasts and like conserving them from bad guys or something, which is like sounds like a fucking brilliant kids film series. That sounds rad. I would love to show that to my kid. That sounds great. There's an alternate reality where there are magical people, and at the end of the series, like the chosen kid sort of creates a new world where there's an end to slavery and all of this stuff, and we've seen so many kids books where like the upending of the status quo is like the whole thing, like it's the whole theme. But we don't have that. We've got the ultimate sort of labor-esque what if we had exactly what we have now, only we're all a bit materially better off.
That J.K. Rowling and Tony Blair both became like people of influence in the same year is a deeply, deeply cursed bit of history.
Once again, I apologize for the British.
We will have to keep apologizing for the British until the day we die. I mean,
as it should be.
Like Cass and I were both riffing about this, like this series just being like an SCP. It has to be. I mean, it's like everyone involved in it appears to be having a miserable time. Like most of the actors within this series, their best work is either behind them or they are never going to get more work after this. Johnny Depp was already known as somebody who... Actually, you know what? I was talking about this to someone the other day. The worst thing that happened to Johnny Depp was Pirates of the Caribbean.
Agreed.
Because it turned... He was, if you look at his work before then, like he was trailing off around the millennium, but Pirates of the Caribbean stopped him from doing any interesting work in his later career. In the same way that, like, we compared it to Robert Downey Jr., whose substance abuse issues in the 90s, he still managed to produce a shitload of incredibly good work. And right up until he started playing Iron Man, he was still doing stuff that was vaguely interesting. But once he became Iron Man, it just killed him. Like, it just fucked him up. And he can't make good movies now. And I'm like, with Eddie Redmayne, I think Fantastic Beasts is going to prevent him from donning the accessibility gauntlet and becoming every minority character he can possibly play.
I really, speaking of Johnny Depp, and I'm mindful that we're coming to time. It's difficult to find on the internet now, and I'm not sure why that is. But if you can, please find the Rolling Stone article from 2018 called "The Trouble with Johnny Depp," and it paints.
That thing is so good.
It is the most fascinating and bleak portrayal of an actor. Like, so this would have this came out now. I'm thinking about it about the same time as this film, and it's deeply bleak. He hated it. I think that's why it's difficult to find. If you can, please read it. It's a superb, it has got better writing and better character development and better themes than watching this film, and it will take you far less time.
And Johnny Depp is still the villain.
Indeed. Right. I want to stop talking about this film, never think about it.
Okay,
again.
So I did say to everyone earlier, I was like, because obviously the best thing about this film is Jude Law. Name a Jude Law film that you can watch instead of watching this movie. And for me, I'm actually going to go with one that I was talking about last night with Ross. We're going to watch it this weekend, which is 1999's Existence. It's a David Cronenberg movie. It came out a few months after The Matrix and was kind of overshadowed by it. But it's kind of like imagine if David Cronenberg did The Matrix and Inception at the same time with Jude Law. It's very good. It's very fucking weird. Like that's my one to recommend.
Watch Gattaca. again from the mid-90s. Very, very good. Again, big science fiction fan. It's excellent.
I'm going to annoy Ross by saying Captain Marvel.
He's really good in that.
He is very good in that. I'm also going to go a bit off script and say that if you want to go see a fantastic film, please go see Everything Everywhere All at Once in cinemas at the moment, because it's one of the best films I've ever seen, and I am going to be annoying about it and tell everyone about it.
I so want to see this movie because it's Michelle Yeoh finally getting the role she fucking deserves after like 30, 40 years in the industry.
Yes. It's extremely good, and you will kick yourself if you don't see it in theaters. Although COVID's happening, so if you can't, that's valid too.
Please see it any way that you can.
Yeah.
My recommendations are Rise of the Guardians, fantastic kids film, or Anna Karenina.
Is the Guardians? Is that the one with the owls?
It's the one where there's like the Tooth Fairy and Santa and everything, and they're like, right. I think that's what it was. It's been a long time. But they're like trying to fix things. I don't know. Kids love it. My sister loves it.
I think it's famous for having twink Jack Frost.
Yeah, it is.
Jack Frost is canonically a twink.
Oh yeah, I completely forgot. Like I mentioned it when we tried to do the recording last week before my brain melted. If you want a movie that's got Johnny Depp, Colin Farrell, and Jude Law in all playing the same character, watch Terry Gilliam's last movie. I know he's a terrible transphobe now, but it was Heath Ledger's last film, and when he died, they hadn't done all the CGI stuff with the background, so they got Johnny Depp, Colin Farrell, and Jude Law to fill in for him, and it honestly is a weird fucking movie that is intensely more colorful and with actually no, it's got more plot than a Fantastic Beasts movie, but yeah, watch that one. It's actually, that one's really good. Like, I'll have to watch it with you at some point, Ross.
And on that note, thank you very much, Cassie and Charlie, for coming along with us on this journey. And I need to watch another film so that if I die, Fantastic Beasts wasn't the last film I saw.
Very fair. Thank you for having us on again.
Yeah, thank you.
It's been a pleasure. There's more laughs this time around, I think, and among the bleak themes of this film.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Thanks a lot, everybody. See you next week. Bye.